then after those individuals pass away, the verses should also pass away, meaning the verses should not be applied anymore. And that's why Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that, look, the verses of the Quran are for everyone, for every time period. That means what? That means, for example, the Quran, when it says Tabbat yada abi lahab, does that mean that this surah was only and only meant for Abu Lahab? If that's the case, Abu Lahab has passed away, he's burning in hell. It's been 1400 years. That means that these verses of the Quran do not apply to anyone anymore. Correct? But that's what the Imam says, that this way of thinking is incorrect. Because these verses apply to everyone, everywhere, in all of time period. He says that you have to find the individual that these verses will apply for. This Tabbat Yada Abi Lahab, this Abu Lahab, who personifies what Abu Lahab personified? Abu Lahab was the name of an individual, that's absolutely true. But he personified some actions. He personified something that Islam did not like. Correct? So what is our duty today? We look for that person that personifies what Abu Lahab personifies. We stay away from them. You look at all the verses of the Quran that talk about the mu'mineen. The mu'mineen. What was it that those mu'mineen did? What were those actions that those mu'mineen did that Quran reveals verses for them? What was it? Whatever actions that they did, if it was just for that individual, that means what? That it doesn't matter how much we do the same deed, we will not get sawab for it. Why? Because the verse of the Quran only and only applies to that individual. Correct? But that's not correct. We look into history, or we look into the Quran, and we see, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen, very famous verse of the Quran, where Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ayat al-Wilaya, where Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives a ring in a state of ruku. Sahih, very famous. Was it only and only Amir al-Mu'mineen who did that, and he's the only one who got sawab for it? Or no? Did there need to exist individuals in every era who did the same exact thing? Amir al-Mu'mineen is the misdaq of that verse. That's absolutely true. He's the first individual to do that. Correct? But this wilayah that Amir al-Mu'mineen holds, does Imam Hassan alayhi salam not have that same wilayah? Does Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam not have that same wilayah? Does Imam Zaman today, does he not have that same wilayah? He does. So this verse of wilayah that was revealed for Amir al-Mu'mineen, that's absolutely true, it was revealed for him. Why? Because Amir al-Mu'mineen lived at that time period. But does that mean that Imam Hassan did not give a ring in a state of ruku? Does that mean that Imam Hussein did not give a ring in a state of ruku? Does that mean that Imam Muhammad Baqir, all the Imams, did not give a ring in a state of ruku? No, they all did. From Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says that this verse applies to all of us. Applies to all of us, meaning from Amir al-Mu'mineen to Imam Zaman alayhi salam. So if it applies to all of them, then all of them should have done the same action that Amir al-Mu'mineen did. That's how it would apply to all of them. Correct? We have to find the individual that the verses are applied to. This verse applied to who in this time period? Imam Zaman. The Quran, it talks about Fir'aun so much. Fir'aun's dead now. Fir'aun was dead even when the verses of the Quran were being revealed. Fir'aun was dead. So why is the Quran reminding us about Fir'aun? It means that there was a Fir'aun living amongst those people in Mecca and Medina that the Quran is telling us about. Someone who embodied what Fir'aun represented. When you look at Namrud, there was someone who was living, or there were people that were living in the time of the Holy Prophet in Mecca and Medina who embodied what Namrud represented. What did they represent? What did they represent? Arrogance. Arrogance. Fir'aun, arrogant to the point where what? He claims to be God. Namrud, arrogant to the point that he claims to be God. When it came to the people in Mecca, what were they? The Arabs, what were they so proud of? They were proud of being Arab, that was it. They were proud of being Arab, one. They were proud of the language. They were proud of the Arabic language. And because they were so proud of the Arabic language, this is one of the reasons that the Quran was revealed in Arabic. This is why the Quran was revealed in Arabic. Because at that time in Mecca, whoever could speak Arabic poetry, poetry was at its height, especially in Arabic, in Arabia at that time. At that time, if you were a poet and you bought poetry that no one else could match, what would people do? They'd give you gifts. They give you gold. They give you everything. Not only that, but some history books, they say that other poets, they bow down in front of the poet who had this type of poetry. This type of poetry. So what did they rely on? Their poetry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a book which is not poetry, but when the poets heard it, what would they say? They said that this book is magic. This book is magic. None of the poets would deny the poetry of the Quran. They would not deny the Arabic of the Quran. No. What would they deny? They would deny the subject matter of the Quran. Meaning what? Meaning that they deny monotheism. They deny monotheism. They deny the subject that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach mankind. None of them would deny the Arabic. No one denied the Arabic. It was what? It was only and only the subject matter. That's it. And this is the reason that the Quran was revealed in Arabic. Why? So the arrogance of these Arabs at that time, it can come back to the human level. It can come back to the human level. Did it come back to the human level? To a certain extent, yes it did. To a certain extent. Even today, even though Islam has said that this should not exist, Arabs, what do? We're Arab. Persians, we're Persian. Pakistanis, we're Pakistanis. Indians, we're Indians. What do? They say, no, we're better than others. We're better than this other group. The first thing that Islam tried to do was get rid of this arrogance. How did it first try to get rid of this arrogance? In Mecca, what was there? A class system. First and foremost, there was a class system. The rich and the poor. Islam, it said that this needs to get out of Islam. 2, free men and slaves. Islam, it comes and says, no. There is no free man and slaves. No, every man has been created free. It's us that have enslaved man. It's us that has enslaved them. Islam, it comes and says, this should not exist. This is why the Holy Prophet, what did he do? He freed slaves every chance that he got. He freed them. And people say that the Holy Prophet had slaves. The Holy Prophet did not have slaves, brothers and sisters. Every slave that came, he freed them. But what would they do? They'd listen to the Holy Prophet and they'd be amazed by his speech. And when they would be amazed by his speech, they wouldn't want to leave him. 1. 2, from wherever these slaves were being brought from, what would happen? How would they be brought? There'd be wars that'd be fought in the areas that they're coming from. Who's there to go back to now? So what does the Holy Prophet do? He tells them, if you want to stay here, you can stay here. I will be the one who will provide for you. I'll provide for you. This is what the Imams did also. The Holy Prophet, he tried to get rid of this idea. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want this. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants arrogance of this individual to start, or this individual's arrogance to start being lost from. These types of ideas. 1, 2. The ijaz of the Quran, or the ability of the Quran to not be imitated. It's called ijaz. And this is one of the things that the Muslims, they say that this is a miracle of the Quran, that this Quran cannot be imitated. Correct? What does this mean, that this Quran cannot be imitated? Does this mean that we can't write the Quran anymore? No. Some people, they ask, well, this really isn't a miracle. Why? Because, for example, some of these novels, they can't be imitated again. They can't be rewritten. For example, you take any novel, Harry Potter, you take any of these novels. They say, because it can't be rewritten, does that mean that these novels are also miracles? No, there's a difference. These novels cannot be rewritten. Why? Because of copyright laws. What copyright law is there for Quran? There is no copyright law. The ijaz of the Quran, meaning that this Quran cannot be repeated, in the sense that no one can imitate what this Quran is saying. What does that mean? That means the balagha of the Quran, it cannot be imitated. Where you have one sentence or one phrase, one passage, and you can get 10 meanings out of it. That's what cannot be imitated. 1, 2. The Arabists themselves, they say that the way the words are of the verses, the way the words are of the passages, the way the verses are of the surahs, an Arab even today cannot make those types of verses. And what does the Quran say about this? He says, the Quran itself, it says that if they were truthful, tell them to bring at least, first it says one surah. No one was able to bring one surah of the Quran. And where was this? Do you all know? In Mecca. The surahs of the Quran that were revealed in Mecca, how are they? Are they long? No, they're very short. They're very short. The last part of the Quran, the last juz of the Quran, all those are Meccan surahs. 4 verses, 3 verses. They couldn't even bring 3 verses. Correct? The Quran says one whole chapter, nothing. Then it says 10 verses, nothing. Then later on it says 5 verses, nothing. Then later on, finally it says, then bring 1 verse just like it. Yet nothing. Even today, in this day and age, there were researchers in England that were paid millions of pounds. Paid millions of pounds to find mistakes in the Quran. To write a verse just like the Quran. And you can find this on YouTube. They were paid millions of pounds. And those researchers, they said that we couldn't do it. We can't find a mistake in the Quran. Grammatical mistake, we can't find it. Writing one verse of the Quran the way the Quran is, we can't do it. Millions of pounds. This is the ijaz of the Quran. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means when He says that this Quran cannot be imitated. No matter how much you try, it will not be imitated. 1, 2. The science that exists in the Quran, even though it's not a scientific book, there are scientists that say, yes, the science that exists in the Quran, because this exists and we've verified this, this could not be the speech of a human being. What do I mean? The Quran, where it says that this universe or the heavens, they're constantly expanding. They're constantly expanding. This was found out when? This was found out in the last 100 years. Correct? They asked, how was it possible that this man, who the Muslims themselves, this is one of the biggest regrets in Islam, where Muslims themselves, they think that their own prophet was illiterate. Where they think that their own prophet, Nabiullah Musa's people, they did not believe that Nabiullah Musa was illiterate. Nabiullah Isa's people, they did not believe that Nabiullah Isa was illiterate. None of the previous prophets' people, none of them believed that their prophet was illiterate. But when it comes to the ummah of the final prophet, the Muslims, they believe that their prophet was illiterate. How sad is that? The Quran itself says what? وَعَلَّمَهُ شَدِيدُ الْقُوَّةِ. The one that has the most power, he's the one who taught him. He's the one who taught who? The final prophet. And yet you have Muslims that say that he was illiterate. On the Day of Judgment, these Muslims are going to have to answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His most loved prophet, they claim that he was illiterate. How does that make sense? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends someone to teach all of mankind, but then he sends someone who's illiterate? What sense does that make? Would any of us ever go to a teacher that we know to be illiterate to learn from them? My teacher, for example, if I know that he doesn't know how to read, she doesn't know how to read, she doesn't know how to write, would I go to them to learn from them? No, of course not. What am I going to learn from someone who himself or themselves do not know how to read and write? Absolutely nothing. Yet the Muslims, they went to a teacher who doesn't know how to read and write, or who claim that he doesn't know how to read and write. And why do they claim that? Because the Holy Prophet did not write anything. Just because I do not write something, logically speaking, just because I do not write something does not mean that I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write. The reason that the Holy Prophet did not write was why? Because if he was to write, then the people of Mecca, the people of Medina would say that the Prophet has written this Quran. That's the reason. And Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that may the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be on any individual who thinks that the last prophet could not read or write. This is how the Islamic Ummah is. But when you come to the science of the Quran, like I said, the expansion of the heavens, which was found to be almost 100 years ago maybe, that space is constantly expanding. How would someone 1400 years ago know that the space is expanding? The telescope wasn't even invented then. We only found out that the space is expanding in the last 100 years. Correct? How does someone 1400 years ago know that the sun is not stationary? The sun itself is moving. How does someone 1400 years ago know that this earth is also not stationary? It's moving. It's revolving. How does someone 1400 years ago know that it's the winds that pollinate the flowers? These are the scientific facts that are in the Quran, but even today, even now that these facts are being denied, what are they doing? They're reinterpreting or retranslating some of these. Why? Because they've realized that these verses are actual truths. And if they go deeper into these truths, they'll have to accept that this Quran is actually a word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Correct. But this Quran, brothers and sisters, what are we supposed to learn from this? Is this Quran just for us to read? Is this Quran just for us to kiss? Is this Quran just for us to have on our shelves? No. But the sad truth is, many of us, this is all we do with it. This is all we do with it. We'll read it like if it's a novel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Holy Prophet, no, this Quran is not for that. It's not for that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says so many times in the Quran, do they not think, do they not ponder over what is being said to them? When a passage is read, it's my duty, it's your duty to think about what that passage means. Think about that passage. To the point where the Aima, they say, our true Shi'as are those when they come across a verse of the Quran that talks about hell, they ponder over it and they start to cry. They ponder over it and they start to cry. Those are our true Shias. And when they come over verses that talk about heaven, they ponder over them and they get happy. But many of us, what do? Because we don't have time. We don't have time, we'll just read it, not think about it. Not think about it. In reality, Amir al-Mu'mineen or Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, whichever one. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says that an individual should split their day into 3 parts. 3 parts. 3 parts would mean 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that an individual should split their day into 4 parts. Meaning what? 6 hours, 6 hours, 6 hours. 1 part is supposed to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 1 part is supposed to be for your daily life and your activities. 1 part is supposed to be for sleep. According to Amir al-Mu'mineen's 3 parts. Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam says the 4th part is supposed to be for you to spend with your family. The time that we're supposed to give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be that 1/3 or that 1/4, the time that we're supposed to give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reading the Quran and pondering over these verses, where have we allocated that time? We split it up. And now we don't have that much time to read the Quran. We don't have time to read the Quran. And this is not what we're supposed to do. If every individual just splits their day up into 4 parts, into 3 parts, they'll realize that reading the Quran itself, it benefits them in their daily life. Some people, they're working, they get stuck on a task and they're having difficulty. They'll read the Quran. If they read the Quran, what happens? That task becomes easier for them. That task becomes easier for them. Why? Because in this Quran, there is what? 1, shifa, 2, ease of this world. The Quran isn't going to give you the world, that's absolutely true. But it will make this world easier if you follow the guidelines that the Quran has set forth. And because we've taken ourselves away from those guidelines, the troubles that we put ourselves in, or the troubles that we're in today, we blame that on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We blame that on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the Quran. I said in the beginning, we get asked this question, these rules that are 1400 years old, why do you still follow them? There should be a change in these rules now. They shouldn't apply in this day and age. No, there's some rules, there's some laws that transcend time. These laws of the Quran, they transcend time. What do I mean? In Islam, what is the punishment for murder? The punishment for murder is death, correct? The punishment for murder, what I mean by murder is wanton, meaning that the person that you killed, there was no reason for you to kill them. There's no self-defense, no nothing. You just killed them, correct? The punishment for this is death. The society that we live in, what did they do? It was like this 50 years ago, 60 years ago. But nowadays, it's not like this. What did they do? Lifetime, thank you so much. They put you in lifetime in jail, correct? Not just lifetime in jail, but if you do good in jail, you can get out earlier. And you have some countries in Europe, they've literally done this. They've literally done this in Europe. They've been given life sentences, but they've gotten out in 20 years for murder. How's this fair? How's this fair? In Islam, what's the punishment for rape? Thank you. The country that we all live in, what is it? What is it? A few years in jail if they get convicted? Or if you're a politician, You're able to pay him off and you're done. This is what it is. Is this what justice truly is? No. This is why there are some laws that they transcend the time period that you live in. These laws that they speak about, the laws that deal with death, they say we shouldn't have them anymore. Why? They look at laws where, for example, a thief's hands get chopped off. They say, no, you know what, this is a barbaric law. Why is it like this? Do you know why it's like this? Do you know why did they say that? It's because they themselves, they steal. They themselves steal. If you look at the country that we live in, the Western world, how much have they stolen from the East? How much has the Western world, for example, stolen from Africa? I'm talking about minerals. I'm talking about worldly matter. I'm not talking about spirituality. No, I'm talking about worldly stuff. How much has the world stolen from Africa? You look at just in our lifetime, how much did the West steal after they invaded Iraq? Correct? This is the reason they don't want these types of laws. Why? Because if they're applied, the first and foremost people that they will be applied to is themselves. Themselves. But even these laws, there are 22 conditions that need to be met before that hand is chopped off. And that too from the fingertips, in our fiqh, from the fingertips. 22 conditions. But they don't tell you that. They just say, oh, this is a barbaric law. No. To you, it's a barbaric law. Why? Because you're the one who constantly steals. If you were to get caught, this is what would happen to you. Correct? This is why there's some laws that need to stay in the society. Why? Because first and foremost, these types of laws, what did they do? They act as a deterrence. They act as a deterrence. This is why you see, for example, in Islamic countries, I'm not saying that people don't steal. I'm not saying that. There are people that do steal. But is the theft the same amount that it is over here in these Western countries? No. Why? Because they know that if they get caught, their hands get cut off. It acts as a deterrence. This is the first and foremost thing a law is supposed to do. Deter people from committing crimes. Deter people. If the law isn't doing that, then what good is that law? It becomes useless. These Islamic laws, first is deterrence. If they do not get deterred, then by all means apply them. And that too after the conditions are met. Whatever conditions. If you need 2 witnesses, you have witnesses. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The verse of the Quran that I started this lecture off with, inshallah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he says that we sent Hazrat Musa with our commandments, and we asked him, or we told him to bring your people out of darkness. And last week we talked about what this darkness was, and last week we talked about what that nur was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the people of Musa to be brought out of. Does this verse only and only apply to the people of Musa? Did this verse not apply to the people of Holy Prophet also? The darkness that they were in, what kind of darkness were they in Mecca? The darkness of polytheism. That was that darkness. In this day and age, does this verse not apply? Or no, is this done? No, in this day and age, especially in the society that we live in, darkness, polytheism, okay. Shirk, darkness, correct? What is the darkness that eats each and every single one of us? Each one. It's not necessary that we all have the same darknesses. Someone, like I said, might be arrogant. That's a darkness. Someone might get angry very quickly. That itself is a darkness. Someone might be committing some sort of haram act that no one knows about. That itself is a darkness. These are darknesses, individual darknesses. And each and every one of us needs to be pulled out from these individual darknesses. And the Quran, when they're asked, or when we're asked, the prophet that you follow, you claim that he brought this book. What proof do you have that this book was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What proof is there? Is it just the ijaz of the Quran? Is it just that idea that this Quran is not, the ability of this Quran to be imitated, that does not exist? Is it just that? Or no, is it more than that? No, it's more than that. The science that exists in the Quran, it's there. The philosophical truths that are in the Quran, they're there. What are you looking for? How do you want to get to the truth? That's the question. Some people, they think that no, this world, this dunya is the only way that we can reach truth. This materialistic world. If we understand this materialistic world, then we can get to the truth. If that's true, then that means that science is the only way to reach the truth. If that's the case, then the Quran has some science to look into it. No, some people, they say, no, to get to the truth, we need to use our mind. Philosophy. If that's true, look at the philosophy of the Quran. You'll get to the truth. What is it, or how do you want to reach the truth? How do you want to take yourself out of that darkness, whatever that darkness is of yours, and get to that truth? And inshallah, next week, it will be Eid al-Ghadir, inshallah. It will be the 18th next Thursday. Next Thursday lecture, inshallah, will be just on that topic itself. That topic, I know if we talk about Ghadir, some people, they don't like Ghadir to be talked about. Why? Because it sows, or they say that it sows disunity within the Islamic communities. And to look at the day of Ghadir in this way, if that's the way we're going to approach this day, if that's the way we're going to look at the verse of the Quran that were revealed on this day, then we have to ask ourselves, if that's the case, then why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveal those verses that He revealed on the day of Ghadir? Why did He make Amir al-Mu'mineen on the day of Ghadir? Did He not know that it was going to sow discord within the community? So inshallah, we'll talk about Ghadir, but we'll keep it mild, we'll keep it intellectual, we'll keep it according to Quran, according to Hadith, and not just our Hadith, but Hadith of the other schools of thought. If you all have any questions for Quran, yes. Alaikum salam, brother.